Hello, everybody, and welcome to Boston Balling. I'm your host, Gabby Hurlbut. I hope you all had a fantastic holiday weekend. I know it was really nice for me just being able to spend some quality time with my family. So definitely happy holidays to all of you. Looking forward to the new year coming up and what that has to bring us. I'm excited to also bring you another episode of the show today. I have a really special guest joining me on this episode. She's very, very talented at what she does, definitely knows a lot about baseball and the Red Sox, writes for The Athletic. So, Jen McCaffrey, how are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. I definitely appreciated you being so willing to hop on here with me. So I definitely want to talk to you a lot about kind of what's going on with the Red Sox and hear your thoughts on kind of this off season so far. But before we do that, can you just talk a little bit about kind of how you got involved in the industry?
Yeah. Let's see how much time we have. I'll try to keep it brief. It's a little bit of a winding road, but yeah, I went to school for journalism. I went to Syracuse. I graduated in 2010. I did not have a job, so I moved home and freelanced at the New Bedford Standard Times. I grew up in like southeastern Mass. So yeah, freelanced, kind of had a bunch of freelance jobs, worked at a Macy's, like stocking shelves and babysitting, and had like 5 jobs. Um, I ended up actually moving to Philadelphia for like a couple months for like a part-time job working on the Philly Inquirer and Daily News website just to kind of add something to my resume. I lived with like my friend's parents. Um,
That's awesome.
about a year after I graduated, I got a job covering high school sports for the Cape Cod Times. So that was like my first full time job. I worked there for 3 years and I did a lot of like newspaper shifts at night, but also covered high schools for like 10 months out of the year and then also Cape League baseball in the summer. And I had always had a passion for baseball. I grew up watching baseball with my dad and grandpa, and knew I kind of wanted to try to follow that as a career, but also knew that I was going to have to cover a lot of other things to kind of get there. My editor there, though, knew that I was trying to pursue a baseball like reporting job, and so in 2013, the Cape Cod Times was really small, and they used to have like Red Sox beat reporters, but when I was there, again, it was mostly local, but he wanted to be able to Bill Higgins wanted us to be able to cover like the big stories. And so throughout the 13th season, I went up to Fenway and kind of got my feet wet covering the Red Sox here and there for like doing columns for the Cape Cod Times. And even throughout the World Series, like the home games in the World Series and obviously the rest of the postseason. So it's really good experience. And it also helped me meet a lot of people. And I ended up finding out at the end of that year there was going to be an opening at Mass Live for like a pro sports to cover like all pro sports. So like kind of general assignment pro sports reporter. So I applied and ended up getting that. I moved up to Boston and I basically covered everything. It was mostly Red Sox for the first like part of the year. Then I moved into Bruins and Patriots. We had a Celtics writer, Jay King, so we didn't really need as much Celtics coverage. But yeah, I kind of did everything. And after a year there, I moved into the Red Sox beat writer that we had left, and I took over his job in the spring of 15. So I've been covering Red Sox full time since 2015, but at Mass Live, I was there until the beginning of 18, and then I got hired by The Athletic to cover Red Sox in the beginning of 18. So yeah, that's kind of a condensed version of the roundabout way that I kind of got here.
No, that's awesome though. It seems like you definitely, got some good experience along the way, met some people who, were in the industry that helped you learn along the way too. And I feel like that's really important when it comes to getting to where you want to be is having those connections in the industry.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, like I had an internship in college at WEEI, and I worked with Rob Bradford and Alex Spear, and now we're kind of on the beat together. Obviously, Alex is at the Globe, and Rob's still, at WEEI and Audacity. So it's kind of funny to be kind of colleagues almost, or like competitors, I guess, in a sense, with them and kind of covering the team with them, even though they kind of helped me, figure out how to do this whole thing back when I was, 18, 19. So, yeah, definitely a lot of those people have really like just helped me over the course of my career become a better writer and a better reporter, and I'm really grateful to them.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's super cool to look back on the experience and be like, yeah, these people were kind of mentors to me back then, and now we're like kind of coworkers.
Totally, yeah. It's
That's like super cool.
funny how things work out. Yeah.
Yeah, and I probably was so cool being able to cover 2, like, World Series runs too, because in 2013 and 2018, obviously, like, those must have been so fun to be able to cover.
Yeah, 13, obviously I had no idea what I was doing. I was kind of coming and going, so I didn't really know the ins and outs. It was sort of just like kind of learning on the fly. It was still obviously a tremendous experience. And it's funny, I always like tell people the story. I covered the clinching game of the game 6 of the World Series, but we're a small local newspaper on Cape Cod, and I had the next day off, I think, because I didn't get home until like 5 a.m. to drive all the way home back home to the Cape. But then the following night was a Friday, and it was Friday night football. So I was like on the sidelines covering like a high school football game, like a day, after being in
Wow.
the clubhouse, covering the World Series. So yeah, that was obviously a really awesome experience. But 18, I was like much more like kind of knew the lay of the land, knew how to cover the team, like knew what stories to look for. When in 13, I was sort of just writing what happened. In 18, I was trying to like find different angles, and I just knew the team much more, much better. And felt much more like a real reporter, as opposed to someone just sort of parachuting in. But both experiences were very, very cool, and very, just really helpful for your career to cover those kind of big events and learn how to do stuff that everyone has their eyes on, and also just under pretty kind of tense deadline pressure too.
Yeah, and I feel like also the fact that you were open to covering everything, like different sports, before you really got into covering baseball full time, I could imagine was also probably helpful too, because I know people always tell me like you need to be open to different things along the way in your career. And that might mean like covering sports that you might not follow as closely or are less familiar with, because it's only just going to like help you down the road.
Yeah, it opens doors, and you also you might find out you like something more than you do. I didn't had never covered much. I'd never covered really any NHL hockey, until I covered the Bruins. I covered a lot of like high school and college hockey when I was down in the Cape. But I ended up like really liking my time covering the Bruins. It was only a few months, and they were really awful at the time. But yeah, it was a totally different from what I had experienced covering, baseball and football. So yeah, and I mean, even just on a much smaller scale, covering all those high school sports, just sort of they help you, and just doing all the kind of the other jobs that maybe you don't that you don't think, this isn't what I want to do, or maybe this isn't like the path I want to go down. They kind of just help make you more well-rounded. They kind of help you become a better reporter, ask the questions that, figure out how to ask questions, figure out how to interview people. And you can kind of just like build yourself up that way, and kind of, start small. I think a lot of people too just kind of want to like jump right in, and they think, and I did too, growing up, you watch these sports, you're such a, intense viewer of the game that you can kind of just jump right in. But I feel like it is super helpful to just be able to have all those other experiences to kind of lay the foundation for when you do kind of get a job that's it has maybe, a little bit higher profile, and that so you're kind of like ready to handle all the things that are thrown at you, yeah, when they do come.
Yeah, no, that's definitely great advice too. And you do a really good job with your Red Sox coverage too. So obviously it definitely paid off for you because you seem to really enjoy what you do now.
Yeah, no, I do. Yeah. There's definitely, like any job, I guess there's pluses and minuses and, ups and downs. But for, by and large, yeah, definitely enjoy what I do. And I'm glad, it was a kind of a roundabout way to get here. But I think, yeah, it definitely all kind of paid off in the end.
That's awesome. Yeah, good for you, for sure. And I know it's obviously, there's been some definitely fun times with the Red Sox for you, like we kind of talked about that you were able to cover. Obviously, last season was definitely a frustrating one for sure. There were a lot of changes as opposed to, how they performed in 2021. I think because people had higher expectations going into 2022 because of how the 2021 season went, and then it just kind of didn't go that way. And so, going into the off season this year, it's just kind of been, I think, a little bit confusing for people in terms of the direction that the team is really trying to go in. So I definitely kind of wanted to get your thoughts on how the off season's gone so far, like some of the moves that they have made so far with where we're at right now.
Yeah, it's sort of the past few years really have had kind of this roller coaster effect to them. The really high highs of winning and doing really well, and these super low lows of the team just super underperforming and being terrible to watch. So I think yeah, it's extremely valid for fans to be frustrated. They have an ownership group that's one of the most wealthy in the sport, so you would think that would understand that fans would want them to kind of pay up and be up there. And yes, they have been up there in terms of payroll the past few years, but some of these deals that have fallen through, and I know we're probably looking right at Xander Bogaerts square in the face. That's number one for this offseason, but whether it was any of the others in the past, like with Mookie Betts, or even going way back to John Lester and things like that, I think fans hold on to that and are frustrated by those kind of things. And yeah, after a down year this past year, I think they were assuming, especially just given the way that a lot of the conversations heading into the offseason were going, when we heard kind of Heim Bloom talking about all this building that they were going to do. And yes, they've added people and added good players, but I think the Bogaerts thing really, threw people, just especially the way it went down. And then just, yeah, there's still obviously holes. And what are you going to do at shortstop now? And I think there's kind of a lot happening behind the scenes, but at the same time, I can certainly understand why fans are frustrated and why they feel, they see all these Steve Cohen's and kind of the Mets and the Dodgers and all these other teams spending hundreds of millions of dollars, and the Red Sox have gotten some fine players, but not ones that are breaking the banks, so to speak. And I think people equate spending with winning, and you win with stars. And so I think they need to kind of figure out a way to get back to that, or find a way to make some of these deals work and pay off, because yeah, they're losing fans for sure. And I think you can only bleed that so much for so long before people kind of move on to something else, or figure out find another another team to to follow. So yeah, it's been, I think, frustrating for a lot of people so far this winter. We'll see, what else they have left to do here. But yeah, they definitely aren't done yet and have a lot left to do.
Yeah, I mean, obviously with the Bogart situation, one of the most frustrating things for me, I think, was that I feel like they weren't like showing as much interest as they should have in trying to work out a contract with him before he even hit the free agent market. Because I do think what the Padres gave him in terms of years is just too long. But I think he would have taken less years to stay in Boston if they offered him maybe, 6 years or so before he even hit free agency. And I think that to me was one of the most frustrating things when it came to that situation, because I do think it could have been avoided before that. But some people are also even saying, did they bring Trevor Story in with the idea that they probably wouldn't keep Bogarts anyway, which they never really came out and said, but it's almost starting to seem like they took on that Story contract as like that replacement for Bogarts.
Yeah, I mean, I think, they've admitted that they probably didn't handle these negotiations the way they should have, in terms, especially in the spring, with kind of just tacking on that 1 year to make it, for 90 million. That obviously was insulting to Bogarts, especially just given he'd already taken a hometown discount. So yeah, the contract he got from San Diego, it shouldn't have even really gotten to that point for the Red Sox from their perspective. They clearly just didn't want him enough. They said, all offseason leading up to it, that he was their number one priority. But, the way the market was going, you had to have known that it was gonna, maybe not go up that high, but they, they definitely had their chances, and they could have gotten something done a lot sooner. And I think things changed on them a little bit, and they wanted to get him for what they wanted, and not necessarily what he wanted. And obviously that's why things went down the way they did and kind of ended on a sour note for him. But yeah, I think definitely should have gotten things done earlier. And regarding Story, yeah, I mean, I think any guy you sign like that, you're kind of thinking about contingency scenarios. So while I don't know that it was we're definitely moving on from Bogarts, when we signed Story. I think, yeah, sure. Like he was a career shortstop. And even though they moved him to second base and he's had these arm issues, it definitely was, an insurance policy, so to speak. I think they were still hoping Bogarts was going to come back, but, again, under their terms and not necessarily, wanted to go way over their spending limit. And they've, been asked a million times about how having Marcelo Meyer kind of in the waiting affected things, and maybe not wanting to give Bogarts, a 10-year deal because they know they have this guy that they really want to see. But they'd say time and again, no, that's not how we look at negotiations, when in actuality, of course it is. Like, you're not going to block this guy who's there's a consensus across the industry that he's going to be, a really big deal. And, obviously nothing sure, but you want to give a guy like that a chance. And so that's kind of all that goes into these negotiations, is kind of balancing the present and the future. And is the future a certain thing? Do you want to, ruin your relationship with Bogarts, and how much can you push it? And what, all these different contingency scenarios. So I think there is, it's not always so black and white, and they should have done some things differently. But I do think, there's always stuff kind of happening behind the scenes that even as reporters, we're not even privy to, or kind of can't find out. We try to get as much as we can, but there's always relationships or conversations that you're never going to know about that probably shift directions, of the way that things go. So, yeah, so they're here where they are now, and now they got to figure out what they're going to do next.
Yeah, it's definitely, you have to wonder kind of what the conversations are with them behind the scenes that they as a front office have, that we just will never really know, because there's definitely certain things that they're talking about. And I do think they know and understand what the areas are that need to be addressed. I'm just not really getting a sense that there's a lot of urgency to address a lot of those holes. And now with just seeing the whole Bogart situation and how that went down, I am concerned about the Devers situation too now, in terms of how they're going to handle that. Because that's another thing that I wanted to hear your thoughts on too, is how much you think that the Bogart situation is going to affect Devers signing a new contract in Boston. And if they feel like they can't come to an agreement with him, or they don't want to give him anywhere close to what he wants, like, I'm looking at it as then they probably should consider trading him and trying to get something for him, instead of letting him walk in free agency, like the Bogart situation turned out.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, all of that's on the table right now. It's weird because you would think that they can't do this again, but I feel like you can never say never now, because they've done it before. So if they're gonna just kind of dig in and not spend on these players, then they're gonna keep doing what they're doing. I just don't know how it's gonna affect their bottom line. I think they are really gonna have to start considering like NESN ratings, and fans are still showing up, but how much do the fans that show up actually care? Like they are they just people that are there as like tourists, or kind of looking for a night out? And those numbers can only sustain the team for so long. The park was definitely not as full last year. So these are all things I think they're definitely, have to factor in. People are getting angry, that these guys are walking and other teams are spending on them. And yes, the Red Sox have a responsibility to not, go crazy with contracts and, hurt themselves in the future. But at the same time, they have the money, and that if that's the way the industry is going, they have to keep up. So I think they're kind of balancing all that. I don't know. I feel like I think that they're going to get something done with Devers, but just I thought they were going to get something done with Bogarts. So the one thing I don't think though that is just because Bogarts isn't here, that Devers is going to, walk. I think they are extremely close. I know they are. I've talked to both of them about how close they are. But at the end of the day, I think they both realize again it's a business, and if the Red Sox do want to give Devers 350 million, I don't think he's going to say no just because Bogarts isn't here. I think that I think they understand that side of things, but yeah, again, if they don't get it done, they have to trade him. They have to get something because they let Bogarts. They thought they were going to try to make a turnaround at the trade deadline and this past year, and that's why they said that they held on to Bogarts and JD Martinez and didn't trade them, but and kind of were hoping Sale and Paxton were going to be back and give them a boost, and obviously that didn't work out, and then everything kind of crumbled around them. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I can't imagine a scenario where they let this whole thing happen all over again, where they don't get the contract done, don't trade the player, and then they're kind of sitting on their hands again. So, I mean, you got to learn from your mistakes. And if they view Bogarts as a mistake in any way, they got to figure out a different way to do it with Devers.
Yeah, and I do think that they understand that they messed up with the Bogart situation because it has been acknowledged, at least from what I've seen, that, people have spoken on it that are in the Red Sox front office and have basically said, yeah, we understand that that wasn't handled correctly. Now it's our responsibility to, produce a team that can win baseball games because we know fans are going to be upset. So I feel like if they know that fans are upset about it, then they need to handle the Devers situation differently. And I feel like people, as in fans particularly, are really like, this is kind of the last straw. After they saw what happened with Mookie and after they saw what happened with Bogarts, and now they're like, okay, this is their last chance to kind of try to redeem themselves from what just happened with Bogarts. And so I think with Devers and, his caliber of talent and the fact that he's still young, I think he's definitely worth giving that money to and giving a contract like that too. And like you said, we know they have the money. It's not like they can't afford to pay him. It's just whether they want to commit to that or not. But I don't really see a reason why they shouldn't, because I just think he's such a special player that it'd be hard to really let him go, because somebody else is going to jump right on that and throw a ton of money his way if the Red Sox don't.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of going back to what you said about Mookie, that's why I was surprised they let the Mookie backlash is still happening. So I mean, and they knew they messed up on that one. So that's why I thought it was so surprising they let the Bogarts thing get to this point, because they should have known better. Like, they should have known people cared this much, and should have known that this was going to be a thing that people held onto and held against them. And I can't tell you how many messages I got after Mookie that, I'm not going to watch this team anymore. That, I'm not, going to re-up my MLB Network package or, pay for Nesson or whatever. And it's only gotten worse since Bogarts. And yeah, obviously some of it's just like the recency sting, but yeah, again, like we were talking about, like the stands aren't as full. The ratings are down. So, I mean, they have to be aware of this kind of stuff. And like you said, I do wonder a third time around how much they are going to let that impact. Maybe they don't think he's worth 10 years 350, but maybe they're just going to pony up for it because they can't afford to have another PR nightmare or losing a big name player. That's kind of one of the more interesting things that I'm watching with this, is how many hits can they sustain? Do they care? Do they actually care about people not showing up and people and having this negative cloud hanging over the organization by losing all these guys? Do they really think that this next wave of new players like Meyer and Bayo and Casas is gonna bring everybody back? That's a huge gamble. You're gambling a lot if that's the plan. And I don't know, that's kind of obviously a long-term thing we have to watch, but that's definitely got to be something that's rumbling under the surface. And I don't know. I don't know if they can, handle another big hit like, losing Devers. So we'll see how that all factors into things.
Yeah, I'm definitely all for having talented prospects in your system because that is important. And I've seen, teams like the Dodgers or Padres and even the Yankees, I'd throw into that conversation too, who have brought in young talent from their system, like their homegrown players that you see be successful through their organization. And obviously that can happen and does happen. So I do think that's important. But at the same time, it's really, really risky to have that mentality of we're just going to wait and hope that it works out with these guys. Because then if it doesn't pan out or they just, maybe they can't play in Boston or for whatever reason, they just don't make it at the MLB level, then what do you do? Because then you're kind of stuck again because you're like, well, we just wasted a few years because we were hoping that it would work out with these players. And now we're kind of back to square one. So I just feel like that's taking a big risk. And it seems like, especially with shortstop, they are just trying to do that, look for like a short-term solution until Meyer can come up. But I really do think as much as they're trying to rebuild their farm system and get that talent in the system, they also should be trying to focus on getting MLB proven players that can play at this level, because at least that they're going to produce at and so that to me is, I almost feel like they're not doing enough of that, and they're almost focusing too much on the future to the point where they're just not focusing enough at all on the current team. And that part to me is upsetting.
Yeah, no, I mean, like on all those teams you mentioned, the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Padres, that's great that they're trying to build up their system like them and try to have these, sustainable, churning out a group of these prospects, one after another, like a lot of those teams do. But those teams also spend on the big name players to support the young guys. And so yeah, the way that they're handling a lot of it, they're trying to find these players that sign to 2 or 3 year deals and kind of fill around the edges, and bring in some of these veteran players. Like Kenley Jansen's a great player, but and Justin Turner too, but like, or even like Kike Hernandez, like kind of like they're trying to like fill around the edges and maybe not go for some of these star players that are the ones again that are going to help you win. So it's definitely interesting, and maybe they're going to have the last laugh in 5 years, and they're going to say, see, we told you, we've won 5 in a row, and this all worked out, and we took the heat, and we put our heads down and we just stuck to our plan even though everybody hated us for it. Maybe that's what ends up happening, but right now it just looks very they're just like zagging when everybody is zigging in the industry. And in a way that you just need to keep up a lot with every other team, and they haven't done as much of that. So it's again, that I can understand why fans are frustrated, and they should be, because this is a team that should be spending and competing and winning, like the other teams that we mentioned, and be at the top of the league.
Yeah, and I mean, at least Kenley Jansen is a step in the right direction for the bullpen. Obviously, he's only on a 2-year deal, which makes sense because he is on the older side. And he's obviously not as productive anymore as he was with the Dodgers, because that Kenley Jansen was pretty much unstoppable. But he's still good, and at least he actually is a legitimate closer. Because I was like, this team just needs a legitimate closer, because I feel like they had so many close games this past season that going into the 9th inning when they were up like a run or two, and I never could trust that they would be able to maintain those leads because they didn't really have somebody who could close out games consistently and be able to win those close games for them. So that's definitely somebody who I think can temporarily help fix that problem. And even with Justin Turner, again, temporary, like obviously they needed a DH without having JD anymore. And they did say I know he was going to play first base too. So I guess probably switching off with Casas. But again, like like you said, it's like a temporary fix. So it's almost like, yeah, they're just trying to bridge the gap right now for younger players. But again, the infield is still so dicey right now because even if Story does move back to shortstop, which I kind of feel like he's better equipped for second base at this point, that still doesn't really solve the second base issue unless they just have Arroyo play second base and they're like, yeah, we're just not going to get anybody and we're just going to roll with that in the infield. But I still feel like they haven't really replaced Bogarts's productivity in the lineup. I still feel like there's a blatant hole in the lineup without him here, even though they have Yoshida and Turner now to add to the lineup. I still don't really see many big bats in the lineup, which is kind of concerning.
Yeah, it's a different looking lineup than one that you're used to. I mean, obviously with JD gone too, he was such a mainstay for the last 5 years, and just having a guy that was like a DH. You don't think of Justin Turner as a DH. He's more of a third baseman, and doesn't really have any many games at first at all. And they're gonna have him kind of slide in that first base spot. So they kind of are trying to fill a lot of the square peg round hole type thing. And yeah, I mean, these are good players, but it's just like it's not a like a clear cut map where you can say, oh yeah, I see what they're doing. It's just it's just a risky way to kind of go about it, especially coming off a year where two of your last 3 years, or even going back to 2020, where you've had so much up and down. You would think that entering this offseason, they'd really want to push and kind of fill the holes with guys that are, or not even the guys themselves, but just fill people that have played the spots that they need to fill. So instead of, obviously Story's played shortstop, but like we've discussed, the arm strength is a little bit lacking there, and especially a couple years removed from that elbow inflammation. And it just feels like they're trying to force guys into roles that maybe they're not best suited for, and then they're gonna maybe wonder why it didn't work out when these are good players but just not in the right spots. So yeah, I mean, I think if they do move Stewart to short, they probably are going to go out and get like a second baseman, maybe like a Gene Segura, or make a trade. Find someone on like a trade market, or kind of a cheaper type trade. No one I don't think there's any second basemen out there that are uh, too enticing, or gonna get people too excited. But again, it's just another smaller type move. If that's the route they end up going, maybe there's something else that's kind of in the works. But yeah, it's definitely been a little confusing. And again, maybe they'll have the last laugh and this will all work out. But it's
that'd be fantastic. But
yeah, they're taking the heat and kind of wondering why they're taking the heat. And it's like, well, no one understands, what this doesn't look like a clear cut plan. And it's also hard, from a fan perspective, it's not like there's been a track record of winning. There obviously have been the 4, World Series in the past 20 years, but there's been so many ups and downs. It's not like this type of plan has worked out consistently in the past. Last year in 21, they sort of did something similar, filling holes here and there, and they didn't have enough starting pitching depth. Or, the thing they tried to do with Jackie Bradley, bringing him back and trading Hunter Renfroe, didn't really work out. So it's not, they're wondering why they get all this bad press or negativity from the fans. And it's like, well, the plan that you have right now, no one really trusts it's going to work because you haven't been able to prove that it can work. And maybe you can look at, the 2021 season as a lot of those moves working out. But again, you had Bogarts and Devers and JD in the lineup, and you had a stronger rotation and things like that. So I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot of questions, and I think people have the right to be asking a lot of questions, because there's a lot to be done, and they haven't proven that they can make it all work.
Yeah, because even 2021, it's like they go to the ALCS in 2021, which I personally didn't expect. I think that was definitely a really exciting run for them. Definitely in terms of what they had, there was a lot of talent on that team. I just didn't know that they really had, the talent level to be able to really get that far in 2021. So it was really exciting. But then even going into the 2022 season, they really didn't do a whole lot to build on a 2021 team that went to the ALCS. And that was just so glaringly obvious. And then sure enough, they finished in last place in the division this past season. And it's like, well, yeah, it's because all the other teams in the division, I feel like, did more in the offseason to improve, to try to match the Red Sox who went to the ALCS, and they just didn't really do as much. And that was so disappointing. And I know people were confused because they were like, well, why would they not try to get better after going to the ALCS to try to get that one step further and go to the World Series? So it was definitely just a frustrating what they did last offseason. So I thought what happened this past season would fuel some fire, but I think they're just kind of trying to piece together certain things and hope they can throw guys into positions and hope that it works out. And like, especially with Turner, like people are like, well, he doesn't even play first base, like you said. So they're just hoping that that would work out. I know I did also see a report today that they're listening to trade options for Chris Sale. I don't know how easy that's going to be for them to get a good return on him either if they do trade him, just with all the injury history that he's had the last few years.
Yeah, I mean it's a good question because I don't think you necessarily know what you're going to get out of him, even if you keep him in your rotation. And I don't know that you can necessarily even if he does have a healthy year for him, he hasn't pitched a full year, a full season since 2019. So he's got to be brought along kind of slowly, or reduced innings, or maybe shorter starts if that's the route that they go. There's going to have to be some sort of management to kind of keep him healthy, and I'm sure he'll have some sort of, just because he hasn't pitched consistently for such a long time, some tweaks and strains and bumps along the road, even if none of them are going to keep him out the entire year. He's probably going to have some sort of pulled muscle or something like that. So I mean, yeah, I don't know what I'm sure they're checking in on a lot of people, and sometimes I feel like they do this with a lot of players, and sometimes guys' names end up leaking that they're checking, on this guy, and other ones not. So I don't know that there's a ton to read into it, other than just to see, what the interest might be. Again, like you said, I don't know that there would be a lot of the return might not be the best. So maybe they're just trying to see what people would be willing to offer. But yeah, it is an interesting one to figure out what you would do with there, just given the fact that you have, at this point anyway, more guys to start than spots to give them. But I mean, that's not, like, given what happened last year, I feel like you probably want to hold on to some of those guys. So we'll see.
The rotation is such a question mark right now in general too, because obviously with Sale, his situation in general is a question mark. Paxton, I mean, who didn't pitch all season last year, they're expecting to come in and hopefully be able to contribute, which, yes, I mean, he does have good stuff when healthy, but he's always had an injury problem too. So he's another one that obviously is a question mark. I mean, I definitely liked what I saw from Bayo this past season. I do actually think he has potential. Obviously, Whitlock and Houck are in the mix. Pavetta, it's definitely who's going to even be really, like, what is the starting rotation even going to look like? And second of all, how much can you really rely on the people that are in the rotation, which is why I was hoping to see them make some moves for another arm or two to kind of get involved in that mix, because I do think obviously they made a couple moves to try to improve the bullpen, but I don't really see that the starting rotation is improving. And that's a little bit scary because they obviously didn't have a great rotation last year. And so I just, maybe they still, obviously there's still time. Maybe they will acquire another arm or two, but that's something that I really feel like they also still need to address.
Yeah, and I mean, out of all those guys, Pavetta's the only one, like Whitlock and Bayo in the rotation is great, but like neither of them have pitched a full season in the majors.
Yeah.
Paxton and Sale haven't pitched a full season since 2019. So Pavetta's the only one since 2019, if you're including Sale and Paxton, that's pitched over 100 innings. in a big league rotation. So it's like when you look at it that way, it's like, geez, yeah, you definitely need, a little bit more durability there. Again, especially after last year when they had all these injury issues and guys went down left and right, and they had to rely on the Josh Winkowskis and Connor Siebold's and those guys. So yeah, I think they definitely could use another starter to even just for insurance purposes, because they have, so many guys that, aren't proven necessarily for one reason or another, whether it's injury or just youth or whatever. And, if they're all great, then great. But you have to kind of have, these contingency plans in place. So yeah, I think that adding another starter is, I think I'd be surprised if they didn't add another starter.
Yeah, no, I think they know they have to. It's probably not going to be like a huge name, like a big, huge caliber player, but I think it's going to be somebody to kind of help. Obviously some people were talking about maybe bringing back a Valdi or Waka. Doesn't seem like they're really super interested in bringing back either of those guys, at least from what I've seen. I'm not sure, so it probably is going to be somebody else, but I definitely think they need to bring in somebody who just isn't as much of a question mark to be in that rotation, because it's a problem if they're kind of trying to go out there and rely on Chris Sale to be the number one guy, because that alone is an issue because of just obviously with his past few years. And it's obviously unfortunate. I mean, 2018, he was phenomenal, and that was the Chris Sale they obviously were hoping to still have now. But it's just unfortunate that it just is the way it is. But I do think they make a couple more moves prior to the season starting, because if they don't, I really think that if they went out there with the team they have right now on opening day, I think we would see a pretty similar season to this past year.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, a few of the names have changed, but just given the way the other teams in the division have improved, yeah, I can't imagine they'd finish much above fourth or fifth if they kind of trotted out the same team. I mean, you can try to rely on the fact that one of these other teams might get ravaged by injury, but that's not really a way to go about it. So yeah, I think that I'm sure that they will add at least a handful more guys, and maybe some of these under the radar guys will end up, like John Schreiber kind of coming out of nowhere and performing. But yeah, I think you definitely need to add at least a couple more established players that are going to give you a better chance to compete in the division, so that you, do have a more competitive season and don't, kind of fall into the same close but not enough type year that you had in 2021.
Yep, it's tough. The AL East is tough, and it just keeps getting tougher, especially even with, the Orioles. They even had a pretty good season this past year, and I think they're going to be better too. So it's just when you're in a division like that where every team is good, you have to be able to keep up with the changes that the other teams are making and be able to, fix your team and fill in the holes that you need, just like the other teams in your division are doing to fill the holes that they need. So I really, really hope that they do some more, which I think they will. I don't think they're going to do anything drastic in terms of bringing in huge names, because a lot of the bigger free agents are off the board anyway. But I do think they'll bring in a couple more people, and we'll just, I guess, have to see what happens, because I'm just not super confident in the team to produce that they have right now.
Yeah. I what they have right now, I feel like I think they know that's, not it's not going to cut it. So, and Bloom's made, spring training type deals, whether it was Story or the Hunter Renfroe one was like late in the off season last year. So it's not, he does have a track record of kind of obviously the Mookie Betts deal in February of that year. So he does have a track record each of the past few years of pulling off a pretty significant move that kind of alters the roster. So we'll see if that kind of happens again this year. But it does feel like there's more to be done. And I think they know that too.
Yeah, let's hope so. Let's hope they know that, because I think we're going to have a bunch of fans who are unhappier than they are already are. So fingers crossed that they make some more moves. But I really appreciate you hopping on the show with me today and sharing your thoughts on all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's always good to chat, and yeah, I'm glad you invited me on.
Yeah, thank you so much. I hope you have a really good rest of your week. I know you said you were on vacation this week and off, so that's awesome. So hope you get to relax during the rest of the week, and that you have a really good New Year as well.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks so much, everybody, as always, for tuning into the show. Hope you all have a wonderful New Year as well, and have a great rest of your week. And I will catch you all on the show next time. Go Red Sox.